So welcome everyone to the SCVO session as part of Digital Leaders Week. This session is what charity leaders are learning from the tech sector. So our host today is Maddie Stark from SCVO. Guest is Nathan Sparling from HIV Scotland, and you also have John Fitzgerald from SCVO and me, Siobhan Mercer from SCVO. So welcome to this session. As I say, we're recording the call and that'll be up on our YouTube channel. There's quite a few of us, so stay muted, but we do want to hear from you. So use the chat box, that's down the bottom of the screen if you've not used Zoom before. Do feel free to put your cameras on. We've set this up as a meeting because we like to see everyone and keep it interactive rather than a webinar. And if you have any questions, use the chat function at the bottom of the screen. So I'll hand over to Maddie now, our host.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Siobhan. As I said, it's great to see so many people here, so thank you very much for coming along today. I'll start my slides in a second, but just as a kind of a special thank you to Nathan, who has got back from his holidays abroad, which were cut short for, I'm sure we can all understand why, who got back at 3 AM this morning and who is still currently on annual leave. So thank you very much, Nathan, for doing this today. It's much appreciated, so thank you for coming along. I will start my slides, and as always, we are really used to doing these things at SCVO, and this tends to be the point when I completely forget how to use Zoom. So I will do my best to do it as I would regularly do it and not break out. So we should be okay. So are you able to see the slides? Is that right? Yep, super. Thank you very much. I'm just going to take off the auto when it does its own subtitles because it doesn't particularly work well with the Scottish accent, which is always a bit of a thing, I think, sometimes. So just before we start properly, so this is what we're here to do today. As through kind of 5 years of SCVO running what we call the Senior Leader Programme, we've learnt quite a lot about what our charity leaders are learning, particularly from the tech sector. So that's what we're going to learn today, and or what we're going to hear about today. And Nathan is here to give his own, as a charity leader, his own example of what HIV Scotland have been learning. This is who we are. I am Maddie Stark. I am at Stark Madeleine. You can get me on Twitter, and that is also my email there. And then we have Nathan Sparling, CEO of HIV Scotland, and he is at Nathan Sparkling, which is a fabulous story of why it's called Nathan Sparkling. Let Nathan choose to tell you if you would like or not, but that's where we are. And Nathan is better at Twitter than I am, so that's worth bearing in mind as well. So kind of just think about that at the same time. From yourselves is in the chat box, if possible, for you to let me know where you are, so where you're coming from, yourselves, and just tell me where the weather is. So are you in the UK? Are you Edinburgh? Are you down south? Are you up north? Are you abroad? Are you Europe? And the weather here in Edinburgh, where I am, is, I think the word is dreich, you would describe it. It's not as bad as it was. The rain's off, but I certainly can't get my washing out, as I said, which is always a bit disappointment. So if you could let me know. So London, rain, Dudley, grey, but dry, that's like here. Perthshire, breezy, Blackpool. Oh, Glasgow's dry. Oh, interesting. Troon, it sounds like Scotland's getting quite similar weather. Windy and fresh. Belfast, we like that, windy and fresh. That's a good drying day. Nathan, you're in Fife. Cardiff, grey. Oh, there's a lot of there's a lot of grey and gloomy. Oh, the UK. That's kind of, is that an analogy for just the general mood across the UK today? Grey and gloomy, with a bit of a breeze. Is that maybe where we're at today? Manchester, you're grey and gloomy too. Excellent. So that, hopefully we will be able to lift that grey and that gloom over the next 45 minutes and give you some information that will be of interest to you. So on our, just as an initial introduction to Nathan, Nathan is Chief Exec, as we've said, of HIV Scotland, a national policy advocacy and campaigning organisation. that aims to prevent new HIV transmissions and ensure that everyone living with HIV can live long, healthy and happy lives. And I'm currently wearing a special t-shirt that is part of one of the campaigns from HIV Scotland. So if you'd like to know more about that, Nathan can tell you all about that as well, but I'm a very proud wearer of my t-shirt. Nathan has been involved in policy and public affairs for over 10 years. He doesn't quite look old enough, does he? He doesn't quite look old enough, bless him. Having held roles in Scotland, Scottish and the UK Parliament's advising on social policy, Nathan returned to Edinburgh as well to take up the role of Head of Policy and Campaigning at HIV Scotland in July 2017. And a whole year later, just over a year later, was then Chief Exec in November 2018. Nathan is responsible for overall strategic direction of the organisation and also sits on HIV Clinical Leads Group for Scotland and the National PrEP Coordination Group. So I think that's PrEP is a medication, I think. Is that maybe the wrong word? But yes, it's a medical part of the medical world. He's also responsible, he's also fellow at the Royal Society of the Arts, which I found fascinating, Nathan. I was like, oh my God, look what you've accomplished. I've got a dog and a husband. I'm done. That's kind of me about what my bio would say. And he's also a member of the Institute of Directors as well. So we are very lucky to have such an accomplished individual with us today. So thank you very much again, Nathan. Nathan is here to talk about a particular approach that they've taken at HIV Scotland around the role of what's called an expert chair. And he's going to talk about that actual style, what that approach is, and he's taken something from the tech sector, if you like, and he's made it fit our sector in order to get a good result, or the result that we would be looking for. The majority of this information comes from the work that we've done at SCVO with our Senior Leader Programme. So we run, I suppose it is essentially a change management programme. So it's how to undergo organisational evolution, or other people would call it transformational change within your organisation. And we use digital as the catalyst. So digital is the tool to really shift this organisational change forward. Within the programme, we work with senior leaders for over a 6 month period. So we do a kind of a face-to-face or now live sessions, and they get a lot of one-to-one support. We do that also with Third Sector Lab. There's a guy called Ross McCullough who does a lot of work with us on that, and I co-facilitate that with Ross. And over the last 5 years, we've really seen a shift in the methods of working within our sector. We were talking about this earlier, what we've seen is over the last 5 months, I mean, this is one of John's talks tomorrow, is we've seen 5 years worth of organisational service evolution happen in 5 months. So it's not just within our sector, you'll know that it's within all kinds of sectors. A lot of sectors have had to make really quick big changes in a very, very short space of time in order to keep providing that service. We were already starting to see this happen in the charity sector. What happened was it just happened a lot faster. So there was plans in place for a lot of charities to make the shift to using digital more. Nathan's organisation is one of those. And then over that 5 months, it just really sped up when this was going to happen. As I said, John's got much more information about that tomorrow. So there's also a couple of key documents that Siobhan's going to put in the chat box. We do quite a lot of work with the Catalyst, which is a big kind of organisation down south. And they're spearheaded by another organisation called CAST. So we've got information from them. And I will do a brief nod to a report by Nesta, who are an innovation organisation. And they have written a report quite recently, I think it was in July it came out, around the charity sector collaborating with startups. So there is a lot of kind of thinking and mindset change, as I say, happening within our sector. So some of the key things, so what are we learning? So the key things that we're learning are around collaboration, around understanding and using design principles, around what the kind of the importance or the brilliance even of iteration, and then just a simple statement called defining you're done. And these are the key things that we are seeing and hearing from our charity leaders that they are learning. So within collaboration, I suppose the new thing for us is, this is very much talking about having the right people at the right time, doing the right thing. And within this, for a phrase within us, within the charity sector, for those of you who work within the sector, for those of you out with the sector, what would previously happen is we would enter into a partnership with another organisation that may or may not actually be a real partnership. It could be for funding purposes, it could be because a local authority has asked us to do it, or it could be because actually if we, if we work together, we could get more result for the people that we're working with. But we would tend to have our separate agendas, so we wouldn't necessarily be working together for the same aim. We'd still have our separate agendas. And what we're finding now, and we're learning very much in the tech sector, is around true collaboration, and that people working on a project at the beginning might not be, and are unlikely to be, the people who are working it at the middle and at the end. So it's about bringing in other people from other organisations, and even within our own organisations, who have got specialisms and expertise in different fields to really move that, move the project forward. In the Nesta report, it really aims to increase awareness of some of the barriers. And one of the things that they highlighted, which was from Alzheimer's Society, was that for us as a sector, it's quite a new thing for us to understand that we can't do everything ourselves. We are, certainly in my experience of the 25 years, and I am kind of known for this, I will do my best to do as much as I can, regardless of whether I should, or even to the point regardless of whether somebody else does it better. So actually taking that step back and going, do you know what, this isn't us. There's an organisation out there who's doing this differently, better. So let's ask them to help us. That's a kind of a mindset change that, as I say, is happening, but then we've just really shifted that really recently into that collaboration sphere, to actually thinking about, we need a new partnership with a shared goal. An organisation that's done this particularly well is LGBT Youth Scotland. Jane Griffin has partnered with Digital for Good here in Edinburgh, so they're part of the Tech for Good movement. And what Jane found, and this is from her blog, I think it's called Hot Tips for Volunteering with Digital Volunteers. And Jane really talks about that idea of, there are lots of people out there who have got all the skills, but they might have their own barriers to working with our sector. So it's about understanding a different language. Jane talks about the tech sector seems to love Pythons. So it's that idea of actually understanding where people are, what they want to do, and what that means for the two sectors to actually collaborate together, and that there is all of this skill. So actually going out and finding it and understanding and learning different language to work together so that we're able to do it to our best abilities. Other things that we're learning, as I said, are around design principles. So that idea about putting user needs first. And again, this is something that we did because we would talk about person-centered services. So that very much for us was the idea of, we've got the person at the center of everything that we're doing, but traditionally the intervention that they were at the center of would come from an expert. So I used to work very much in the field of addictions, and the intervention that occurred for individuals was from a medical or a health expert would say, this is what you need, this is what that person needs. Whereas now we're moving back to go, actually, you're the one that has come to us with this problem. How best do you think we can help you? So we're changing that mindset. And even for me, at my grand old age of being at university, I was kind of taught very much to be solution focused, and let's work, let's get there, let's get out there and let's fix that problem, without actually spending time on what's the problem we're attempting to fix. And then back to that collaboration. Are we actually the people who should be fixing that problem? Who else has got that expertise? So actually putting user needs first, thinking about the user journey and that user experience, and generally that whole idea around, let's observe somebody, what's somebody's route into us, how do they get to us, where are they coming from, and then what happens to them once they're with us. And this is very much based on the Scottish approach to service design. So the Scottish Government has their own approach to service design. And this is something that we use heavily at SCVO, and we talk about a great deal in the Senior Leader Programme as well. So this is something that we do actually talk about. And this idea is around the why and the what, and understanding the problem to design the solution. And a lot of the work that we do, and we've come out with our senior leaders, is that actually spending on the discovery, the why, the what is the problem, the why are we doing this, why do we need to do it, understanding actually what that problem is. And that has been something that we've been seeing a lot coming from the charity sector. And this is, as I say, the parts of it are not new, so that person-centered approach, but what is new is who we're asking and how we're going about asking that. And that's the UX, if you like, understanding pain points in particular, that we're getting from the tech sector. So seeing what's happening, create a piece of software, you make a website, let's use that same process, but we're putting it onto our services. So we're just working in that different way. A great example of this is Weekday Wow Factor. So this is an organization which I think just has one person, Pasna, who's the chief exec and founder of this organization. And Pasna works with elderly people to do a day disco to keep people active. And when all the services had to move online, Pasna's challenge was, how do I keep delivering this service? And that was kind of where she really used a lot of the design principles, and in particular that user discovering what the problem was, thinking about where her users were in that tech arena. So a lot of them were on WhatsApp. So how could she use what they were already using to help them? And then understanding a practice and thinking about, okay, so let's practice this. You're telling me that you can use this. Let's actually see if you can. So when she introduced something new, she was testing it with a couple, helping them over the phone and practicing it with them. And then she was going back to them and keeping people involved. So how are we doing? What's happening? Let's keep the board involved. So she was talking to her board, and then she's now gone into the next step, which is new collaborations. So again, it's that idea of using those principles of collaboration and design, that UX experience, and actually going back and keeping everybody involved in everything. The final ones really is iteration, and again, you'll hear this with some of the with part of the example that Nathan is going to talk about. It's that the MVP. This is a word that we use quite a lot, but we don't, or we certainly didn't necessarily know what it meant. But again, with leaders, it's that idea that we, as a sector, we're used to having that end service. We know what it looks like. We know where we're going, and what we've learned a lot from the tech sector is it doesn't have to be a finished product. It can be the skateboard, as that illustration shows. You don't have to finish with the car. You can have that, well, what's the basic idea? What's the first step? What's the smallest thing we need? And then build from that using data. Oh, surprise, data, amazing. And actually collecting the data and testing and using that real life information, as opposed to it being somebody's opinion or somebody's idea. It's actually, okay, we've got data to back this up. Let's test, let's go out, let's see what's working, let's gather that information. And then doing retrospectives. Again, retrospectives are not necessarily new. Most of us in this field have got what's known as reflective practice. If you're in this field, I'm sure you do as well, where we will think about, okay, how did we work with that individual, particularly for delivering a frontline service? How did we work with that individual? What happened to them? What was my part in that? What would we do differently next time? So that could be part of your one-to-one or your support and supervision. Whereas what we've taken from the tech sector is that idea to actually put that onto a project. So as to have shorter lived projects, do it in shorter periods of time, and then take a step back and go, okay, so let's do that reflection on the actual project, and look at what worked, what didn't work, what kind of worked, and then actually moving into the, right, what will we kill? And that for us in the charity sector is a bit of a shock, because we don't like to stop doing something, because we will make it work even if it kills us. We will keep going and keep going. Whereas what we're learning from the tech sector, and certainly what we're seeing from our senior leaders, is that actually, do you know what, we've been banging on at this for a month now, nothing's happening, let's stop right now. Think about something else, let's try something different, let's try a different part of the skateboard, let's go back to that initial idea. And that really is saving a lot of time and capacity within the sector as well, because people are not, I think it's one of the digital transformation books, I think, is it Tom Sizemore, that says, you know, we need to stop making broken things look pretty and actually get on and do the work. And that's a big thing that we're learning from the tech sector. I've got this slide just as for those of you who are not in the charity sector. This was something that I've learned and use my whole kind of 25-year career. This is Kolb's learning cycle that some of you may have seen, that's used quite a lot in psychology. And this is a cycle of a model of learning. And for me, what it very much shows is it's that kind of cycle of iteration. So it's the same thing, it's just in a different context. So again, we've been using this in our sector for a long, long time. We're just using it in a different context. We're taking something from somewhere else and we're putting it into something different. And that for me is that kind of whole iteration process working from the tech sector. So that this is what the tech sector are doing, but they're doing it in a product. We would only use this to learning whereas actually it's that whole thing around, well, let's apply it to a service. So it's that, it makes it easier for me to understand what we can learn from the tech sector and how we can adapt it to the way that we want it to go. And then just finally, there's something called Define Your Done. This was one of the biggest bits of information I got, which was around a Kanban board. My done is different from Nathan's done, it's different from Siobhan's done, it's different from John's done. And when we're working on projects, this is a big takeaway for our senior leaders, is as a chief exec, their done is probably different from a development worker's done. So getting that as a language initially is really key to understanding that as part of it. Sorry that I've just kind of talked at you for about 10-15 minutes there, so apologies for that. So that's kind of our whistle-stop highlights of what we've learned from the senior leaders. If you'd like more information, please do contact me. And now I'm going to hand over to Nathan, who's going to talk about their particular project and their piece of working. So if I stop sharing and hand over to you, Nathan.
Thank you, Maddie. Can everyone can hear me now? Because Maddie was struggling to hear me earlier just before we started, and it caused me severe anxiety. But thanks, Maddie, for your wonderful introduction to what the sector's learning from tech. And I was reflecting, when we started developing the project I'm going to talk about, I was reflecting on a bit of work that I led on when I started at HIV Scotland in 2017, and I was tasked with chairing a national working group on behalf of the Scottish Government on HIV testing. I chaired that over something like 12 months. Then there was 6 months writing a final report. We brought together, between 12 or 15 people for 6 4-hour meetings in person between Edinburgh and Glasgow. And it was a logistical nightmare. And when you look at the last 5 months and how we've created meetings and done work, we can absolutely see a different way of doing it. When I chaired that HIV testing group, one of the things we recommended was a HIV self-testing service. So people could order a HIV test online, they could take it at home and know their HIV status within about 15 minutes. We recommended that in 2018. And there wasn't a national self-testing service until April 2020. That's because when the pandemic hit, HIV services and HIV testing services were completely decimated. Clinicians moved to do COVID work. We didn't want people coming into services, so services in the main closed. And within that, we recognized a real challenge, which was we were telling people that now was the best time to get tested because you've been told not to have sex. Now, I'm sorry if I'm the only person that's talking about sex in one of these digital meetings, but we were telling people don't have sex. So because you're not having sex with people that you might not know their HIV status, now's the perfect time to get tested. But nobody could get a test because in Scotland, there isn't a national self-testing service that was free that met people's needs. And myself and another organisation, Waverley Care, met to discuss, how could we do this? And Maddie, your example of, iteration was one of the perfect reasons why I think there had never been a national HIV self-testing service in Scotland before, because people always imagined a final product that met everyone's needs and did everything bells and whistles. And in the end, we created in 4 weeks a very simple website, a very simple form that loads into an Excel spreadsheet on Google Forms to collect people's information. And on a daily basis, one of my team sends the names and addresses of people to the manufacturer to get a test sent out. When we set up that service, we imagined that we'd maybe do 300 tests over 3 months. It's now been 6 months and we've sent out 3,500 tests. And that's, and that service is built up constantly over time through that iterative process. And, now we're moving into an automated world. So we're working with the Data for Good team at Unilever to automate a lot of the back end of the website so that I don't have a staff member working for 2 hours moving data. And that'll all be done automatically. But that was a sort of a historic example, because that testing service took us 2.5 years to develop, because the responsibility was passed to too many people. We recommended to the government to do it. The government then sat on it and didn't really do it. So as charities, we just said, right, we need to do something so that people could get tested. And using that approach and recognizing that we managed to build a service that we'd recommended 2.5 years ago, we managed to build it in 4 weeks, and it wasn't perfect. And we say that on the website, this isn't perfect. Email us if you see anything that doesn't quite work. And we're constantly building it. But now we thought, could we go one bigger? Could we actually redesign and redevelop HIV services for the better? Because HIV services have closed. Nobody's accessing services because of social distancing. We've moved to digital health in a lot of cases. So people are having phone appointments. They're having Zoom calls with their clinician. So now's the perfect time to start to think differently about how we provide care for, there's nearly 6,000 people in Scotland living with HIV. In the majority of those people are very easily managed in that they can go every 6 months for their appointment, and they will get a couple of blood tests and they'll get their medication again. So even if at a very conservative estimate, we said that 55% of people, that was how 55% of that 6,000 were very easy to manage patients. The services before COVID just didn't meet their needs, because if you didn't live in Edinburgh, even if you did live in Edinburgh, say, if I have to travel to the sexual health clinic in Edinburgh, it's either a 45-minute walk, 2 buses, or a taxi to get there. That's then also some time out of your day, some time out of your work. And for people that have to do that every 6 months or every 3 months, it's a bit of a nightmare. Think about living in the islands or in the Highlands, where the only sexual health clinic is in Inverness. That's sometimes a 4-hour drive just to get there. So that's an 8-hour round trip. So we really do need to start to think a bit differently. So we've developed designing the future. We want to look at how we design services to meet the needs, recognizing that within minutes, we were able to move the majority of patients, HIV patients in Scotland, into digital services. So I spent a lot of time thinking, how do we create this blueprint for what a service could look like? And I looked to the tech sector. I was part of the Senior Leaders Programme that Maddie runs last year. Or was it this year? I think it might have started this year. I've lost track of time. And that got me thinking a bit differently. And I really was interested in hackathons and how you could come out with a product or a solution to a problem really quickly, just by being like time limited and focused about, right, we need to create a solution. And it's not saying that it would create the perfect solution, but it's creating something different or thinking about different ideas. So I went away and I spoke to a couple of people that do hackathons in the tech sector, and they were really interested in my idea for a socially distant online hackathon over a period of time, but that was still time sensitive and solution focused. And whilst the hackathon providers might not be getting involved, they gave me some really good feedback on how to run something that would work as successfully as we want it to. So they give me feedback about planning. So plan your hackathon or your service design approach. So decide what dates you want to do things by, get the people that you want, or set up a website and get sign-ups and expression of interests. Before you start the first session, have all of your session dates there. So we agreed that we probably would want 6 meetings that were no more than 2 hours long, because no one wants to be sitting on a Zoom meeting for more than 2 hours. And we wanted that to happen over 6 weeks. So there's not 6 weeks, 12 weeks. So there's a meeting every 2 weeks planned in our diaries. We're going to bring together 12 people, experts in different areas in HIV services, but predominantly people living with HIV, because they're the people that bring the expertise of having to actually attend services. So when we're thinking about creating this new user experience and as service design, we really wanted them to be part of it. So that's why we've got an expert chair role that Maddie mentioned, because the hackathon people said to me, you'll maybe need a facilitator to, keep things going and leading things. And I thought about who that could be. And, we've had clinicians chair our working groups, and that the power dynamic there then doesn't sit well. So we've started now to recruit for an expert chair who will be it's a paid role. Someone living with HIV will work with HIV Scotland as the chair of this working group, and they will lead the work and be the person responsible. And thanks, Siobhan, for posting the sort of advert that we've currently got out. And we've had something like 12 applications from people living with HIV all across Scotland applying for this role, which is, is great for us, and the diversity of people that are applying as well has been amazing. So we want to, through this hackathon approach, and I always use the word hackathon, and then some of my team were like, what's a hackathon? And I was like, how do you not know what a hackathon is? So we had to quickly condense what the meaning of what a hackathon was, so that, if my team didn't know what a hackathon was, the people that would be applying for the expert chair might not know what a hackathon is, and the people that we want to get involved might not know what it is. So we describe it as us taking a hackathon approach. So the hackathon being a design event that usually would take place over a day or two, bringing together service designers and experts to solve problems and design solutions. Decisions that are made quickly by the people in the room, so that a product or plan is available by the end of the event. And the key elements of a hackathon focus on creative thinking, development and design, timing, teamwork, and the common goal. So for us, the common goal is starting off with a blank sheet of paper and redesigning, or not even redesigning, designing HIV services in the modern world. Because we tinker around the edges a lot. And actually, this is about us saying, right, we now have a blank sheet of paper. Let's use that opportunity. Because before coronavirus, sexual health services were stretched. People couldn't get an appointment. And then when you think about this, there's nearly 6,000 people coming into a service every 6 months that might not actually need to be in that room for 2 hours or 3 hours or however long it might take to see 4 or 5 different people, depending on the issues that they're presenting with. So there's a real opportunity for us to use that hackathon approach and the design approach to do something quickly, because I don't want to miss that opportunity that we've got now of people actually recognizing that, oh, you can do things quicker. And also we don't want to onboard people back into services after coronavirus and then us get back into our old ways. So I'm just going to quickly show you what we've, our website that we've now launched. So this is the HIV Services Designing the Future website. It's not even gone live yet, so this is a sneak peek into the website for you all. And this is, our hook to get people involved. And we want people, whether they're key stakeholders, members of communities affected by HIV, clinicians, we want everyone to get involved in this work. And Maddie's point about people collaborating at the right time, at the right place for the right reasons is really interesting as well, because we've also now partnered with the NHS Scotland's digital team, who are going to work with us at the start and at the end of the project, because they're busy people as well. But what's the right involvement that they can give us? So they're going to get all their designers in a room and do a bit of ideation for us at the start of this program, and then do some sense checking at the end and make sure that the things that we have designed might work, or we'll learn from things that they might have done. And then, I'm just going to quickly go through this website, but the main reason that we don't want people's CVs, we don't want people to apply in a long application process. We literally just want to know why people want to be involved. And the other thing that we're doing is paying everyone that is involved. So we're paying the expert chair a salary, because they're going to be working with us for the duration of the period. But people that attend these meetings will get paid, because we need people to be involved because they want to be involved, not just because they can. And a lot of the times in our sector, you either see the same people around the table because they've got time to be involved, or you see the people that have got nicely paid jobs that can volunteer their time if they don't work in the sector. And we want to see the diverse people that might, you know, not be able to be involved in these things usually because they've got childcare responsibilities or they've got another job that they'd have to take unpaid time off. And that's why we're saying, right, we're going to pay people for these meetings. And there's also, you know, because of the funding that we've got for this bit of work, there's pots of money to pay for people's childcare and everything like that, to make sure that we've got the right people rather than just the people that have the privilege to be involved. And a lot of the time in the HIV sector, you know, there's a bit of an involvement paradox where it's always the same voices and not necessarily the people we want to hear from. So that's just a little sneak peek into our little fancy website that we've developed for this Designing the Future project. So I've said sort of most of what I wanted to about the Designing the Future programme, but I'm happy to take any questions or get into a discussion about, you know, what I think we will achieve or reach or share some of our ideas, my ideas that brought us to this point. Maddie's on mute.
Maddie, you're muted.
Yeah, Maddie.
Sorry, typical schoolboy rookie error, Zoom error. If anybody's got anything, put it in the chat box. If you've got any questions, or if you've got anything else, because I think certainly from our point of view, what we're seeing is that one of the key differences for the ways that we are used to working within the sector, and for those of you who are in the sector, is that idea of having the right people at the right time, at the right place, and switching people in and out of projects. Certainly, I was doing some work with Down Syndrome Scotland, and what they were learning around was that the people they had employed at the start of a particular project, their skills were not the skills they were needing as the project was progressing. And that actually, it was Rory Gaffney was on our, again, another one was on our senior leader programme. Rory was saying that idea of actually moving people in and out, so they were all working in the same department, but actually what he was saying was we need somebody who's got these particular skills. And it wasn't things, I mean, things like finance, administrational skills, those kind of skills. It was more around, we need somebody who's a really good problem solver. We need somebody who's got the people skills to be able to set this up as a collaboration. We need somebody who's got that absolute eye for detail right now, who's able to take this further. So that idea of understanding the project as the living, breathing organism, and actually who needs to come in, what and where. And that was a real eye-opener for them as well. And interesting, as you're saying, Nathan, that's part of what you're attempting to do, is to get different people in. Part of the thing that we've learned, again, from the tech sector and hearing that from our senior leaders, is that idea of it isn't, we get the same people. We would do user testing, as we would call it at SCVO, but it would always be the same people that we were asking. So it's not a true representation of actually the people who are using our service or our membership. We put a shout out to our membership, and then what we get back are our regular members, or we will go to specific members. So we'll even cherry pick who we want to hear from. So it's that kind of thing around actually how do you get them in, and that can be quite difficult. So that, Nathan, as you're saying, actually what you've recognised, different folk to come along, which is really good, recognising that somebody might have to take time out, they might have to take annual leave. So let's reward that and hope that we will get more people.
Nikki's got an interesting question in the chat about how we might have evidenced this as an approach that works to get people on board, and the simple answer is we've not. We're alongside this bit of work, we've been thinking about how co-design might work in our organisation. And HIV Scotland, it has always been at the heart an involvement organisation, but a lot of the time, as I said, the involvement of people becomes the same 20 people that either come to a meeting or events or get reply to surveys or emails. And we've really been trying to think about how we get to a wider group of people that we know have come to us for help during the last 5 months. So we know they're there, we know they know about HIV Scotland, but they've just either not had the time or the space to get involved in in different ways. So this is the sort of start of thinking about how we do co-design on a more formal footing of offering that. And we did a lot of learning from Young Scott and their co-design approach. But we've taken it a step further, because Young Scott are obviously working with a group of young people. We're working within the main in Scotland, adults who have other things on. So that we almost had to think about going that extra step, and that's why, looking at making sure people's expenses by minimum are paid, and then thinking about how we can contribute to their pay. Also, for a lot of people living with HIV in some of the more marginalized groups, so migrants, African people who use drugs, they're not getting involved because they've got other priorities. But £50 to them is a reason to get involved and a reason to share their expertise, where they might not be able to get access to funds like that in other ways. So it is thinking about new ways, and we'll use this project to shape that a bit more and try and evidence that. But from the applications for the first role that we've put out, seeing the diversity of people that have applied, it's not the usual names. I think a lot of the usual names have probably realised that we're not looking for the usual names as well, so they've not necessarily applied. But we'll then, depending on who we pick for that one role, we'll then look at how can we fill the other gaps, because we want at least 4 or 5 people on that group that are people with lived experience of these services, rather than trying to pick out clinicians or whatever. And I think you're right, Nikki, about the tech approaches. Do they work in our sector? It's usually the things that cost a lot of money that people shy away from, I think, a lot of the time. And us doing this approach is actually probably saving us money. It's happening over a shorter period of time. It's happening online. So we're able to do what would have probably been a funding application of about £150,000 to do 18 months work is actually £25,000, and we're doing it really quickly. And I've said we're not looking to redesign every HIV service in Scotland. We're looking to say, right, here's what's possible. So get people to think a bit differently, and then hopefully that will lead to the change that we want.
Just, Nathan, I'm aware of time as well. There was another quick question from, I think it was Jane, around how to perhaps reach people who are uncomfortable being online. I think you've maybe part answered that, but I'm going to give you a whole 30 seconds to answer that question.
Really difficult. We've found a lot of online fatigue from everything that we've moved online. People just, shutting off or not wanting to be online. So I think there's going to be a lot of stuff that we do, tasks that we do with people offline to try and minimize the amount of time that we've got on a Zoom call, and also, onboarding people. So I think what we've found with HIV, social groups or whatever, is that people aren't sure who's going to be on it, so they don't want to come on it. So by onboarding people so that they feel a bit more comfortable, we hope that approach will help with that.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, I'm going to wrap it up, but that's our 45 minutes zoomed. Thank you very much. Excuse the pun, terrible. It's been a long day, I'm sure, for all of you as well. Thank you very much to Nathan for coming along, and particularly because you are on annual leave, so super thanks for that. Thank you very much. Pleasure. And also, if anybody's got more information, please do get us at Twitter as well. It's @DigiScott. You can email me, I can pass things on to Nathan, but you can also tweet Nathan as well. We are here to answer questions and pass on information. So thanks again for coming along, and have a great day. Thank you.